Welcome back to In Response EDH. My name is Albert, and today we have another great EDH gameplay video for you. I originally had another game ready to go for this week, but with the recent banning of Hullbreacher, I decided it would be more fitting to use the last two games we recently played on our Twitch stream, when he was still legal. In game 1, I went with Pramikon as my commander. This deck aims to stall the board until I can combo off with either the Thassa's Oracle, Labman, or the 𝐤𝐤𝐤𝐿 combo. I decided to keep an opening hand of Narset, Parter of Veils, Thassa's Oracle, Teferi's Protection, Whirlwind of Thought, Scalding Tarn, Exotic Orchard, and a Command Tower. Mike is back and brought a fun new commander from Modern Horizons 2, Chatterfang. His deck wants to flood the board with squirrels, get in for damage, and sacrifice them to deal with the opponent's creatures, with a few hidden combos built in. He starts the game off with Sign in Blood, Kodama's Reach, Skull Clamp, Chitter Spitter, Squirrel Sovereign, Overgrown Tomb, and a Swamp. New to the channel is our friend Joseph, and he brought along Esix Fractal Bloom. This deck can generate a ton of tokens in a short amount of time and normally finishes with a huge Craterhoof Behemoth. His opening hand consists of Adrix and Nev Twin Casters, Zyndakar's Royal, Rejuvenating Springs, Exotic Orchard, 𝐤𝐤𝐤𝐿 Coast, and 2 Forests. And last but not least, Daniel is back with another one of his fun meme decks, Maelstrom Wanderer. The deck is 97 lands, with Mana Severance and Jace Wielder of Mysteries as the win con. Daniel just tries to ramp out his commander as fast as possible and cascade into the win. He decides to keep a Sand Silo, Nephalia Academy, 2 islands, and 3 mountains. Daniel wins the die roll and leads us off.
I'm going to lead off the game by playing Sand Silos. It comes into play tapped. I can choose not to untap it, and if I do that, I get to put a storage counter on it. Oh. I get to tap it and remove any mana storage counter on to add that much blue mana to my mana pool.
Excellent.
What an odd card.
Yep.
Mike starts off by playing a Swamp as his land drop and casts a Skull Clamp. I drop a Scalding Tarns on the field, tap it, and sack it to search up a tapped Rawgrim Triumph to the battlefield. Joseph plays a Rejuvenating Springs, taps it for green mana, and casts an Exploration. He then drops a 𝐤𝐤𝐤𝐿 Coast as a second land for turn. Daniel decides to not untap the silo and puts a storage counter on it. He then plays a mountain and passes. Mike starts his turn by shocking in an Overgrown Tomb. He then taps 2 black mana to cast a Sign in Blood, choosing to pay 2 life and draw 2 cards. I draw for turn, play a Command Tower, and just say go. Joseph plays a Forest, followed by an Exotic Orchard, and taps all 4 to cast Oracle of Modiah. He then reveals the top card of his library, which is the Pendelhaven. He plays it as his additional land drop from the Oracle.
Fair Magic's lands. Top card.
It's got 5 lands on turn 2. It's talking about Fair Magic.
I end my turn.
Okay.
Daniel once again decides not to untap the silos and puts another storage counter on it. He then plays a Nephalia Academy and passes the turn to Mike.
We're in trouble, boys.
Why?
Because I need to draw land.
Oh my
Because
goodness.
this guy's taking them all.
Mike then plays a Squirrel Sovereign and with nothing else, passes to me. I draw for turn and play an Exotic Orchard as my land drop. I then tap for Jeskai to cast my commander, Pramikon. As it enters, I choose to have everyone attack to the right. Joseph draws for turn and reveals the next card, which I'm sorry is off camera, but is a Spore Mound. He plays a Forest for turn. He now has enough to pay for his commander, Esix Fractal Bloom. Joseph then moves to combat and swings his Oracle at Daniel for 2. Daniel again chooses to leave the silos tapped and put another storage counter on it. He then plays another mountain and passes. Mike draws for turn and doesn't find a land. He then chooses to equip the squirrel with the Skull Clamp and goes to combat. You want me to block it?
Yeah.
So you can draw?
Please. I just want lands.
I asked him to draw something to deal with Joseph and block it with my wall. Sure, I'll block it.
Okay.
He finds a forest thanks to me and plays a Sylvan Anthem. I untap and draw for turn. I play a Plains as my land drop, then tap 4 to cast Whirlwind of Thought. Joseph draws for turn and reveals the Harmonize on the top of his library. He then pays 4 mana to cast 𝐤𝐸𝐿 and 𝐤𝐸𝐿, Twin Casters. After that, he moves to combat and swings his commander at Daniel for 4. Daniel puts another storage counter on his land and draws. He plays an island as his land drop and tells the table he's been unable to find green mana and passes. Mike untaps and draws, and is now having no trouble hitting his lands after casting a Kodama's Reach. He searches up a swamp to the field, tapped, and a forest to his hand, which he immediately plays. I start my turn by playing a Riverglide Pathway as my land drop. I then tap 2 mana for a Talisman of Creativity, drawing off the Whirlwind of Thought. I follow that up by casting Narset, Parter of Veils, once again drawing from the Whirlwind. I choose to activate Narset's -2 ability to look at the top 4 cards and find an Echo of Aeons and put it into my hand. Joseph draws and reveals a Craterhoof Behemoth on the top of his library. He pays 4 mana to cast a Arasta of the Endless Web. Joseph then chooses to end his turn without attacking. Daniel draws a card. He plays an island for turn and transmutes a Teleria West to search up a forest and puts it into his hand.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Hey, we got there!
Get it.
Hey, we got there, guys. Mike draws for turn and plays a Llanowar Waste. He follows that up by casting a Witherbloom Apprentice, and then casts a Chain of Smog, targeting himself to discard 2 cards. He copies it infinite amount of times, triggering the Apprentice, draining us all for 1 life each time. Congratulations on Mike for nabbing another win on the channel. This was the first time we had seen his deck, and can honestly say we did not expect to see the Chain of Smog combo in it, so none of us were prepared for it. Daniel was playing a 97 land deck, so he wasn't going to have any answers, while Joseph and I kept a couple of non-interactive hands. Since this match only lasted about 25 minutes, we all decided to run it back for game 2. In this game, Mike is going last and keeps an opening hand of Sylvan Anthem, Culling Ritual, the Great Henge, Burning Rune Demon, Squirrel Wrangler, Balagid Recovery, and a Swamp. Daniel decides to start the game with Havenwood Battleground, 1 forest, 2 mountains, and 3 islands. Joseph keeps a starting 7 of Exploration, Arcane Signet, Rite of Replication, Golden Ratio, Hinterland Harbor, and 2 islands. And I decide to keep the greediest, worst hand ever, starting with a Ponder, Rhystic Study, Hullbreacher, Alhammert's Archive, Mole Drifter, Archaeomancer, and a Temple of Enlightenment. I start the game off by playing a Temple of Enlightenment and scrying 1 to the bottom of my library. Joseph plays an island and says go. Daniel plays a tapped Havenwood Battleground and passes to Mike. Mike plays a tapped Balagid Sanctuary and passes to me. I miss my land drop and play a Ponder to look at the top 3 cards to try and find one. I find a mountain and play it as my land drop. Joseph plays a Hinterland Harbor as his land for turn and casts Exploration again. He plays another island as his second land drop. He then taps 2 mana to cast an Arcane Signet. He taps the Arcane Signet for green mana to cast a Birds of Paradise. Daniel draws and finds a sand silo again, and plays it as his land drop. Mike plays a Land of War Waste as his land for turn, and taps 2 for Sylvan Anthem. I miss my land drop and have to discard back down to 7. Joseph taps out on his turn to cast a Primal Command, choosing the modes to gain 7 life and tutor up a creature to his hand. He chooses a Tatyova and passes. Daniel starts his turn again by choosing not to untap his silo and putting a storage counter on it. He then plays a mountain and passes. Mike draws for turn, plays a swamp as his land drop. He then taps all 3 lands to cast his commander, Chatterfang, Squirrel General. Since a green creature entered the battlefield, he is able to scry 1 and keep it on top with a Sylvan Anthem. I unfortunately miss another land drop and pass the turn. Joseph untaps and draws for turn. He finds an Oracle of Modiah and casts it, revealing a Selvala Heart of the Wilds on the top of his library. He follows that up by casting a Burgeoning and passes to Daniel. Daniel puts another counter on the silo and draws for turn.
Burgeoning trigger?
Nope, and I got no land.
Okay, enter.
Mike draws a card, taps 2 mana to cast an Arcane Signet. He then moves to combat and swings at Joseph with his commander. Joseph elects not to block and takes 3 damage, but it should be 4 due to the Sylvan Anthem. I start turn 5 by finally finding my 3rd land, which is a command tower. After that, I end my turn. Joseph untaps and draws for turn, revealing a Pendelhaven on the top of his deck. He decides to tap out and cast Tatyova Benthic Druid. Joseph then plays the land off the top of his library, and with the trigger on the stack, I flash in a Hull Breacher to deny him the card draw and create a treasure. He does gain 1 life from the land entering and reveals a giant Ataphage on the top of his library. Daniel finally allows his silo to untap and plays a forest. The table then gets put on high alert for a wheel breach, and Joseph shares some solid advice.
You know what's better than a creature removal? Layer removal.
Mike plays a forest as a land drop and taps out to cast a Drake Keeper. As the elf enters the battlefield, Mike creates 2 squirrel tokens. Chatterfang sees this and creates 2 more. Since 5 creatures came into the battlefield, Mike is able to scry 1 5 times, but chooses to keep the top card there. Mike then moves into combat and swings his squirrel at me for 4. I untap and draw for turn, and start the turn off by casting a Windfall to have everyone discard their hands and draw 7 new cards. But with the Hull Breacher out to stop the draws, the table just has to discard their hands, and I create 21 treasure tokens instead. I then spend 1 treasure to cast a Faithless Looting, drawing 2 and discarding 2. I decide to flash it back, spending 3 more treasures to draw 2 more and discard 2 more. After that, I spend 4 treasures to cast Swans of Bryn Argyle. I follow that up by playing a Glenalendra Archmage. Then use 3 to cast a Laboratory Maniac. After that, I cast an Echo of Aeons, again having the table discard and draw 7, but instead I make 21 more treasure tokens. I then find and cast a Dockside Extortionist, making 5 more treasures, and play an Ancient Tomb as my land drop. I follow that up by flashing back the Echo of Aeons to create 21 more treasure tokens, and draw a new 7. I draw into a Niv Mizzet, the Firemind, and cast it. I then choose to go into combat and swing my Hullbreacher at Daniel for 3. On my second main phase, I cast my commander and pick to attack to our right, and finally end my turn. Joseph untaps and draws, revealing a forest on top of his library. He taps out and casts his commander, Esix. Joseph plays the land off the top, gaining a life, and I create a treasure. He reveals a Craterhoof Behemoth on top, and passes. Daniel draws a card and plays another island. He decides to just pass the turn, not being able to cast his commander and combo off because of the Glendalendra on the field. Mike starts his turn by casting an Esika's Chariot. As it enters, he makes some cat tokens, and Chatterfang makes 2 more squirrel tokens. He then activates his commander's ability, paying a black mana and sacrificing 2 squirrels to give my Hullbreacher +2/-2. But in response, I choose to phase out with Teferi's Protection. Mike chooses not to attack and passes. I phase back in and draw a card. So I think I just win here. I tap the Niv Mizzet, forgetting that I could have done this on my draw step, and ping the Swans for 1, preventing the damage and instead drawing a card. I repeat the process until I've drawn my entire library and win with the Lab Man. Here's my take on the banning. I chose to highlight these games because it showed the Breach Will combo and how oppressive it could be, as well as how easily it could have been stopped if anyone had any interaction before the wheel. I've played this deck hundreds of times, and out of those, the amount of times that I was actually successful in casting the 2 is not very high. Mike's commander, for instance, under different circumstances, is a perfect answer to it at instant speed. Daniel even made it a point to alert the table to expect it the following turn, so you can telegraph it. I just personally don't see anything wrong with it, not only because I play it, but because it doesn't feel any worse than being combo killed with the Chain of Smog or Armageddon, which are also fine. Does it feel great? No, but that's your strategy and I'm okay with it. Do I want to play against it every game? No, but I don't believe it's a valid reason to ban a card because it's not fun to play against. In the end, both of these games took 25 minutes or less, and we had no problem just saying GG and starting up a new one. It's my personal opinion that we can avoid bans like this by having more turn 0 discussions about power levels and what you're running. Let us know your thoughts on the banning in the comments below. We'd love to get your take on this topic. Just remember to keep it respectful, it's a discussion and not an argument. With that said, if you enjoy the content we're creating, consider becoming a patron. When you do, you're not only contributing to the channel's growth, you're also being entered in our monthly patron appreciation Secret Lair giveaways, as well as receiving other patron-only perks and merch as well. All proceeds of our Patreon are currently going to upgrading our camera equipment to give you a better viewing experience. Any and all support is greatly appreciated. Well, that wraps up what we're now calling Season 1. We'll be back in a few weeks with more gameplay videos, but in the meanwhile, we'll be working on some new videos, so stay tuned. We here at In Response would like to thank you for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and make sure you follow us on our social medias. We also stream every Friday night at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you for watching. Have an awesome day.